127.
And welcome back, Dino Bidala Show. We're live right here, Monday, November 12th. Breaking news, my friends. Blue wave got bigger and bluer. Kyrsten Sinema is the winner in Arizona, taking Jeff Flake's seat, another seat from red to blue. And to talk about it, perfect timing, our friend Julian Zelizer, CNN contributor, professor of history and public affairs at Princeton University, and author of various books, including... a new one coming out at some point. Fault lines. So Julian,
yes.
The blue wave, bigger and bluer? What do you think today? We just right minutes before you walked in, it broke. It's confirmed. AP confirmed it, and the Republican McSally has conceded, so it's essentially done.
Yeah, that's a big loss. It is obviously a big seat for Democrats to win, and it's also just important in narrowing Senator McConnell's majority, which he still has, but he's going to be dealing with the same problem he did in the last a few terms, in that he has to keep everyone in line. So this is, I think, an important victory.
But think about it. The Democrats have flipped two. They flipped Nevada, beating Jackie Rosen, beating Dean Heller, and this one.
And maybe Florida.
If we could have just defended all of our seats, we would have the Senate tonight.
Right.
If this would have been it, tonight would have been Democrats get control of the Senate, and we'd all sleep so much better.
Doesn't count, though, in politics.
I know, but
right.
Look, it was that close. I don't know what's going to happen with Bill Nelson. We'll talk about the politics of recounts. You had a great article in the Atlantic today on that, and the big picture. So does this qualify as a blue wave now? What do you think?
Well, I know I saw your piece, and it's certainly wave-ish.
Wave-ish.
Midterms are complicated always, and so look, if the Senate remains in Republican hands, it's not a total wave. Really what you want is total control of Congress. Right. That's what you had in 94. That's what you had in 2006. But this was clearly a very good midterm. They have the House. Power is better than no power. They have a sizable majority in the House, which is good because they can have some defectors, the Democrats, and still push things forward. And in the Senate, at least they generally check the Republicans, and they expanded their state representation. So it was a very good night. You can call it a wave if you want.
I'm calling a wave.
Yeah.
I'm calling a huge wave because it's a story. Julian, I mean, I wrote about this for NBC.com, and if people want to see, it's on Facebook.com/Dino Radio, or I tweeted at Dino Bidala. And they're actually updating it right now. The editor just said about the results of this election, because I begin with certain things. We won 31 seats. Democrats won 31 seats. There's about 13 outstanding races. Estimates are, from Cook Report, 38 to 40 seats. At 31, we have won more than this is the most seats the Democrats have flipped since 1974.
Yeah.
And 74 is when Watergate happened and Nixon resigned just months before the election. So historically, I think this is truly very significant. This wasn't like 23 seats, 24. We could end up with 40, but we're going to end up with 35 to 38. Yeah. This is a big flip.
It's a big night. It's clearly a reflection of certainly the opposition to President Trump, and to some degree the enthusiasm for the Democrats. Again, I'm always just hesitant in that you always can see in midterms the seeds of caution. In terms
seeds of caution?
The seeds of caution in terms of, look, some would argue, given everything that President Trump has done, you could expect the Senate to have flipped. Even with a bad map, you could have expected larger margins in the House. It's amazing he retained what he did.
Well, gerrymandering in bad states for Democrats.
Even throw that, and then you have to kind of add in, though, to the mix, the instability. But look, the key in the end is who has power and who doesn't. They now have power in the House. Having power in the House is significant, and so that is a measure of a wave. It flipped control of one chamber, and for me, that's the most important outcome.
I also think this is an underreported story, is that we flipped 7 governorships.
Very important.
Including Kansas. We could have flipped a few more, but Scott Walker, a former GOP presidential candidate, a formidable one at one point, knocked out as well.
Yep.
And some of those states, it's policy instantly. We're going to see an expansion of Medicaid. The Democrats ran on that. So the people in those states are going to see the power of government in a good way to help them. But also on a hardcore political point of view, you're going to have these governors there after the census when there's redistricting to prevent grotesque gerrymandering. Even if it's Republican-controlled legislature, as the governor, they could protect against the most extreme gerrymandering. They can keep vetoing it and fight over it. How important do you think that is?
Very. So one is policy. It becomes a laboratory for Democrats to experiment with new policies and to push initiatives that are still going to be gridlocked in the Senate. Two, it's redistricting, it's voting rights restrictions that have been put into place. All of a sudden, there's muscle to overturn some of what Republicans have done. And finally, for the presidential election, it's helpful to have a governor of your party in there. They can help mobilize the party. They can help command resources to the candidate of choice. And I think on all three fronts, it's a plus. Republicans still have a lot of governors. Let's remember, Democrats are doing catch up. But this was big in Florida.
23 now.
Florida is still unknown, so we'll see.
And that's why Trump was so concerned about Florida, because it's a second home, but he understands that's a pivotal. We all know it's a pivotal state for every presidential election. So he thinks he got DeSantis in there. He'll help him cheat, or at least he'll help him every way he possibly can. Also, for the Democrats, it expands the Democratic bench.
Yep.
Of now 7 more people will run for president, come in a week from now, because that's what it seems like. What about...
It's also, one other thing to add is it shows that the Democratic mobilization that's been taking place worked. People were cynical. Who cares? You're going to march and you're going to mobilize. What effect will it have? It really did have an effect. It's clear at this point, the suburban educated women, not just as voters, but they have really been doing a lot of organizing since January of 2017 to make sure come election day, turnout would be high. The Parkland kids, there were several NRA candidates who were knocked out, and a bunch of F-rated NRA candidates who won. And so kind of that shows for 2020, this matters. The bottom-up approach to politics can be effective.
I just, before you came on, I had Mikey Sherrill, who won in New Jersey. She won the 11th Congressional District. First time a Democrat's won there in 30 years. And she's a great candidate. She went to the Naval Academy, flew helicopters for the military, then became a federal prosecutor. She did everything. And she's a mom of 4 kids. Yeah. She's going to be a senator from New Jersey one day. She said to me, I asked her, are you going to support Nancy Pelosi? Because that's you're obligated, and you're in the media now, to ask every Democrat who won. And I thought she was going to hem and haw. She goes, no, I will not support Nancy Pelosi. I was like, wow, that was really quick. Max Rose from Staten Island, who beat Donovan there, flipped that seat from blue to red, from red to blue, said tonight, too, on Fox News that he's not going to support Nancy Pelosi. And I had Mark Pocan on, the congressman who's vice chair of the Progressive Caucus, who would not say what he was going to do, but said it sort of cautiously, or maybe foreshadowing, there might be a math problem for her. It all depends on how many seats get won in these last counts. This was after the election. What do you think is going to happen here? And does it matter?
It matters a lot. It really, the leadership of the Democratic Party, which is the speaker, even though it's really the majority leader, it matters. It's going to matter to have someone who's really savvy, who can take on this president and the chaos that he causes. You're going to need someone strong, not just to hold Democrats together, but to deal with Senator McConnell, who will say no to absolutely everything. Democrats should anticipate that. Right. And look, there are some who argue it's a mistake that she's a very successful speaker. She had a very good record under Obama. And of the whole lot, she's still one of the kind of best and most effective people. And she's pretty progressive.
Yes.
So people, they need to have a measure of what the alternatives are. Is it going to be Steny Hoyer?
Oh, no.
Right. No. So I think...
Well, James Clyburn said he would run if she doesn't run. And
right.
If people want new faces, that's not going to help. He might be great. Steny Hoyer, no. If you don't go Nancy, I hope you don't go to Steny Hoyer.
Right. And she's, I don't know. I think she will pull together the votes in the end. But
she's very, very good at what she does.
She's great at it. Right.
And part of me, I'm hoping ageism is not going to play a role. If people do not like Nancy Pelosi, I hope it's because they want a new face who's more progressive. That's the choice, as opposed to just ageism. That's just ridiculous, because we are going to have younger people. But there's been, I can't do the math yet. I just keep hearing no's from people. But I asked Mikey Sherrill, I said, I try to get her to give us some names. Right. And she goes, well, I don't know who's going to run. And I think she was being sincere. I can't be sure. But Tim Ryan's not going to be the one to replace Nancy Pelosi. This caucus is coming in, not Mikey. She's in a district that's certainly a swing district. Yeah. She wants someone who's not, way out there on the left. But I think that's where Nancy's more vulnerable on the left than a Tim Ryan,
Yeah.
centrist white guy. I don't see that.
When the Watergate babies came in 74, they didn't actually take over a lot of leadership positions, but what they did was vote a few people out, some committee chairs, and they made it clear to the next speaker, who would eventually in 76 be Tip O'Neill, that he had to listen to them, that they had enough of a block of votes that they could cause problems. I would guess that's part of what you're hearing, especially if they don't have another person. This is leverage. This is sending a clear signal. Pelosi, if you get the vote in the end, don't just ignore us. We are a caucus. We are strong. It's what the Tea Party did to Speaker Boehner. And so I would think that might be part of what you're hearing.
But what's interesting is that Mikey Sherrill is one of the new people who won, who doesn't get all this press, but in all these suburban districts where we're flipped from red to blue, they're Mikey Sherrills, who have to be more bipartisan, who cannot be this firebrand way to the left. Nope. While, Alexandra from the next borough here wants everyone to go way left. My friend Rashida Tlaib won in Detroit, wants much more left, Democrat socialist. You're going to have this tension within the Democratic caucus over a leader, not over little things, but you might have a caucus now that actually has not just far left. It wasn't like just a wave of not just a wave of people far left. It's a wave of people winning in districts where you had to almost run just slightly center left.
Yeah, no, it's a leadership. It's a challenge to pick the leader, and then it will be a leadership challenge. And those two are not separate. So I think part of what Democrats have to figure out is once this vote is over, that tension is there, and they need someone who is going to be able to manage that. Some would say that's something in favor of Pelosi. Others might want a fresh voice, but I think it's a big factor.
It's interesting. We'll have to look, as Julian was giving his, and that's why I love your insights, a lot of history here, which does guide us and can be instructive, that maybe they make a deal for Pelosi and then someone in that leadership, a new person,
that's
a new voice below Steny or like the third ranking person is some new blood who's more progressive. But part of me wants to see somebody who's different, that's going to be up to date with today's world, on the way to fight and use the media and social media. I mean, Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer stand behind a podium in the Rayburn building and expect to compete with Trump's everything he does, his shenanigans, the spectacle of Trump. And I don't think we need someone like Trump at all. And the more I watch Trump and the more I'm just worn down by his cruelty and his meanness, I just know that I want someone who's going to be compassionate and kind, who's going to run, whoever that might be for Democrats. And I'd rather lose with that than try to match his viciousness and his vileness up there. And I hope no Democrat does that to win. But it's really going to be interesting to see, because we don't have any idea. There's not even names floated of who wants to run.
Yeah, no,
Hakeem Jeffries would be someone, but he's not running for that. He's running for like another position within the party.
Yeah.
Or I'm trying to think of like I don't think Maxine Waters is the answer either. If you wanted someone who's a different generation, let's say.
Right.
And again, I don't want it to be about age. It could be a different generation. I don't know who. I mean, I've had so many on, and I think about instantly, but this is sort of like bias, but like, Congressman Kennedy, because he's a Kennedy and he gave the Democratic response and he's charismatic and stuff. The
answer has to be clear if you're going to replace her, meaning she is skillful enough that you can't replace her with I'm not sure who.
Right.
Because they need to be getting votes right now and they need to be building whoever the they is. Because soon it will be too late. She's building her vote count. She is doing that. And so it's a race for time. It's very quick. So I think all these candidates you're speaking are new faces. Someone is going to have to emerge to take her on or they will lose very quickly.
And if I think about the ones in New Jersey who won, Tom Malinkowski was on the show a few times, again, flipping a district that is definitely was red by like a point.
A lot of these districts
can't go way to the left. And so what people might be thinking of, like Ilhan Omar, who won from Minnesota, who's Muslim, very, very, very liberal, like Rashida Tlaib, they're going to want their leader to be like them, while Tom and people who are more districts that are just centrist, they'll lose with a leader like that. They could end up losing. It depends. 2020 is a weird year. It's a presidential year. So, but if a Democrat wins, they might be gone in 2022. That might be the flip
Yeah, I think they need a leader, whoever it is, who will listen to them. So that's what every caucus or coalition wants. They're not going to close the door to part of the party and say that was irrelevant.
Right.
And the second, though, and this is most important, they want a leader who can win with the limited power the Democrats still have. That has to be the top calculation, or you fall apart as a party, especially in this, divided government.
And the speaker doesn't have to be a member of the House, right? They can go outside of the House and bring in somebody like Barack Obama, which you can't do. But there's no limitation.
Right.
There's no limit because he's third in line for third in line for president. Yep. So it doesn't really cause problems there. Interesting. I'm kidding. I'm half kidding, but why not Michelle Obama, Speaker of the House? Why not pick the best person we could
and just she'll be running for president?
We want this person to be Speaker who's going to represent us. Joe Biden. I mean, why? I know it sounds ridiculous, but in this time when all the norms are gone with Trump, you maybe change your norm for the better by just picking the best person Democrats can outside of the caucus and elect. Has that happened in our history?
No.
Well, that's just not going to happen. But folks, at least everybody knows you don't need to be a member of Congress to be Speaker. It could be, I might throw my hat in. We'll see what happens. So let's take a break. Come back with more with Julian. We're going to talk about the politics of recounts. He wrote a great article today for The Atlantic, giving some history but making a really important point. And again, about Democrats not filling the void on some level on this whole recount fight, that Trump is filling it once again. Rick Scott's filling it once again on the Republican side. And we see Democrats, I don't know where they are in not getting involved in this. So let's take a break. Well, Julian will make more sense of what I was just saying when we come back after this. Progressive values are the best of American values, and we need to keep fighting for them to save our country.
Don't go anywhere. This is the Dean Obadala Show on Sirius XM Progress 127. The biggest stories of the day. Right now. This is the Dean Obadala Show.
On Sirius XM Progress 127.
And welcome back, Dean Obadala Show. We're live Monday, November 12th, in studio, where you can watch on Facebook Live, facebook.com/Dean of Radio. Julian Zelizer, you see him on CNN. In fact, he's in a suit and tie. He's going to CNN after this to fight with Don Lemon. Now he's going to be on CNN. Do you go on Don's show and fight much? Or?
I've been on a few times, yeah, but I never fight. That's not my thing.
That's why you're not on more.
No, I know. I'm not a fighter.
When I went on Don's show, I used to go on Don's show often until the election was over, frankly.
Yeah.
But I would call it Fight Club. I'm like, who am I fighting today?
Right.
Because you really are. There you're expected to fight.
Right. I rarely fight on these shows. Once I did with Jeffrey Lord.
Oh, my God. I used to fight with Jeffrey all the time.
Right.
In fact, we fight on Twitter still. We continue to this day. He calls me out. And Boris Epstein last week came after me on Twitter. And I know Boris. We're actually friendly. We're not buddies, but we had been on over the years on so many shows together. He got so mad at me after the Tree of Life synagogue. And I was like, I tweeted something about this goes directly to Trump's rhetoric against Muslims, also emboldens anti-Semites, because it does. And he got all mad and all this stuff at me on Twitter. I'm like, hey, Boris, if I'm not telling the truth, you can debate that. My favorite moment in the 2016 primaries was with Boris Epstein. We were on HLN, and Carol Costello was hosting, and he was defending Trump then, and it's so early. I'm like, Boris, let me ask you, what do you like best about Trump? And on TV, I go, do you like his sexism, his racism, or his bigotry? Which is your favorite? And he just stopped. He goes, what? What? I go, what's your favorite? I just want to know, right? And he got so upset, but no one had said that to him. So I love that. It was a moment of complete. And afterwards, he goes, you got me with that one. And I'm like, so, all right, let's get back to the politics. Also, I'll tell you about Boris Epstein, because he's now the guy on
Sinclair.
One time on MS, we were about to go on, and right before we go on air, just to screw with me, he knocks my elbow off the table.
Yeah.
Because I was like sort of leaning like this. This was the games, the Trumpian games of these guys, to just get in your head. It didn't bother me. I was like laughing. I'm like, I was the host. I'm like, did you just see what he just did?
He had, it's funny. He had that whole army of people who were his surrogates on all the different stations. And at the time, you didn't really know what it was, but it was a pretty calculated strategy that really got his message beyond him on air constantly. I mean, I don't know if he replicated that from any other candidate. I can't think of any. He knew cable television was going to be the arena for the fight.
Right.
And he flooded the zone with his people, and they were different ranks of people, but they were always there. They were on all the shows. It was kind of sophisticated when you look back at it.
And his whole thing, what Trump wanted for them, was to fight even the battles you couldn't win or shouldn't win.
Right.
Just keep fighting and throwing stuff up there. But whataboutism, it did not matter. Yeah. And it was remarkable. I used to fight a lot with, what's her name? Kirsten Pearson? She's now with the Super PAC.
Pearson, I think.
A few times we were on a bunch of times, and there were times I would just look at the monitor. And I'm like, I couldn't believe she was saying what she was saying. Like, it's like that. There are times when the anchor would look at me, knowing that I can see that I'm on TV, they're not, and they look at me like, are you fucking kidding me? I don't curse often, folks. Sorry about that, but that was the look, because they couldn't believe it, what was going on, and it was working though, because we were like, what?
Yeah, right now.
And this is the inside world, like during the primaries. And I could not believe what they were saying. And they kept saying it. And now you have a time where you have a strong majority of Trump supporters who will believe him over any media outlet.
Yep.
And he won for his base on that battle.
He did. And I'm sure something like that is about to happen. I mean, this does relate to the midterms in that I'm sure he's gearing up for some version of the strategy now that we're in presidential election time. And so who the leader of the Democrats and the committee, they all have to think about this as an important arena, because they missed it last time. And I think that's going to be important for Democrats in the coming months.
Well, the idea that his base believes him over the news. Like, so when he makes his allegation in Florida, there's voter fraud today. And a judge down there said there was no voter fraud in denying a motion by Rick Scott to sort of impound certain voting machines. And the Secretary of State is a Republican, said there's no evidence. It doesn't matter. So literally earlier on, there are Trump supporters outside of Broward County holding up signs saying things like, stop counting ballots, save our democracy. I'm like, this is like Orwellian craziness. I'm like, what? Yeah. Stop counting ballots, save our democracy. And they're embracing him, saying only the ballots on election night should be counted, meaning our military people who are serving are sending their ballots and shouldn't be counted. Do you think this is coming attractions of what we're going to see in 2020?
Absolutely. I mean, this is something he talked about in 2016 when he talked about a rigged election. He talked about voter fraud as soon as the election ended. It's been a theme of his because it undermines confidence in anyone who beats him or beats his party. He's doing it very explicitly in Florida now, even compared to 2000 when the Republicans went full steam ahead. George W. Bush wasn't leading the brigade. He had lawyers doing it. Right. He had James Baker. Trump is doing it right now. He is in a very narrow race, a legitimate recount, where Florida officials working for Republican governors saying this can happen and should happen. He's front and center, raising allegations of fraud, questioning the whole literally asking them to stop. And this is what we're going to see in the next 2 years.
And you wrote in your article for The Atlantic today that was titled, "The 1985 Recount is Suddenly Relevant Again." And I'll tweet that out after the show at Dino Bidala. But you have a great line here. Democrats need to counter GOP talking points with a clear message that they are trying to protect the integrity of the U.S. election system. Yeah. And as you put it, recounts are much more than legal disputes. They are fundamentally political fights. And in politics, story matters. This is exactly talking about who should be the leader of the Democratic Party in the House. We are not seeing the count. We saw Bill Nelson alone on TV a little bit saying every vote should count. Andrew Gillum. I don't see other Democrats. Is it because of the norms that usually don't engage in another state's election?
Yeah.
So they're letting Trump just take the whole battlefield?
Yeah, look, that's the mistake they've made many times over the years. Again, in 2000, they made it. I talk about a fight in 85, they made it. This is a political fight. It's not simply even about who wins or loses. It's about the process itself. And Democrats actually had an issue that resonated in the midterms, and that was voting rights. And a lot of states passed measures to expand voting rights. I'm sure that was part of the mix in the anger in some of these, flip districts about the subversion of the vote. And Democrats should be very clear right now. This is an effort to once again undermine the vote. And that's what the president's doing. And you need national Democrats to get into the debate. You need them really to push back against Republicans who are not only saying this is corrupt, but the next thing they're going to say is this shows how the whole midterm really doesn't add up to much. They're going to use this as a wedge to question the legitimacy of what happened in the House. And Democrats need to counter that. You can't, bring in lawyers when the other team is bringing in all the politicians.
So leading Democrats, Cory Booker, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris should be out there talking about this?
Sure, they should be insisting that this recount is done properly. Whoever, it could end up the results are exactly the same. And that's the probability. Mm-hmm. Although look at Arizona. We're now talking about a Democratic Senate.
Right, but that wasn't a recount. That was different. But yeah, still votes were coming in.
Right.
What's the downside for, say, Elizabeth Warren to get involved or Bernie Sanders to engage in Florida?
That it's a win. It's a good issue for Democrats to stand up for the election process and to make sure votes are counted properly. It's just there is no loss, and Trump will attack them whatever they do. And so that's the constant myth of the Democrat, that there's one thing you can do that will soften the attack. There's nothing. So then you stand for principle.
Right.
And this is a pretty good principle, and this is a legitimate recount. This is totally legitimate. This is a narrow victory, and so we need to know to make sure the vote count is correct.
Speaking of recounts, and folks, I'm going to give you a statistic here, not to depress anyone, what's going to happen in Florida, but just some history. According to Fair Vote, which advocates for electoral reforms, they said out of the 26 recounts of, I don't know if they were statewide elections, but 26 recounts, they were statewide, only 3 changed the result. 2004, Washington governor's race, 2006, Vermont state auditor's race, 2008, Al Franken.
Yeah.
And the most they flipped was 311 votes.
Yeah.
That's the recount on statewide elections. And that's remarkable when you think about it, because it's not, when they're still counting ballots, that's why numbers shift. The actual recount, unless there's a handful of fraudulent votes, something counted twice accidentally, something not counted, you are talking about a few hundred, maybe 1,000 votes shifting gears. And so it's going to be challenging there's 3 recounts in Florida by law, by statute.
Yep. And
the Democrat there might win, not Gillum or Nelson, but the one running for the statewide office, commissioner, we're talking about earlier. it's challenging to in a recount to actually win this.
No, it's challenging. Although this is unusual. We're now talking about elections post the Shelby decision when the voting rights legislation went away. Not all of it, but a key part of it. Florida is one of these states which has had a notorious record by Republicans in terms of curbing access to voting. There's all these stories emerging about ballots that are questionable. And here you have Scott interfering or being very aggressive in a recount about him. And so there's many kind of red flags here about how this is unfolding and what the truth is. But we'll see. But again, Democrats can't just fight this to win the seat. They have to fight the principle, because the principle here about a fair recount is the same principle they're going to have to fight in many states now about overturning voter restrictions and making sure we have a decent election system. And that's a good issue for the party.
What about Democrats? And I talked about it this other day, and I had Congressman Mark Pocan on, and I said, the Voting Rights Act is essentially gutted from the Shelby County decision. Why not Democrats run on a new Voting Rights Act, a brand new one, and say that, and it could end up being the plan B is just doing the right thing with the Voting Rights Act and fixing the formula, but a nationwide Voting Rights Act that says if there's any significant change that impacts minorities that the DOJ has to do, and we can structure it differently. I don't want to structure it here on air, but right now with the Voting Rights Act, they needed pre-clearance in certain states and counties. I'd like to see a national Voting Rights Act, voting for all they can call, to make sure everyone's got the right to vote. And the federal government will make it easier for the federal government to get involved and oversee it if there's something, any hint of wrongdoing. I'd like to see them running that.
It's a terrific issue. Look, the opponents have to be against voting. That's how they have to position themselves. They'll say voting fraud, but it's kind of like the Patriot Act. It's loaded in that way. But this is a bedrock principle of democracy, so it's different than the Patriot Act. And when civil rights started in the 50s, when they start pushing for legislation, Lyndon Johnson started with voting, actually, over desegregation, because he argued that it would even be hard for Southerners. It wasn't impossible, but it would be harder to go against voting, that it has broader support voting. And I think now it's a really significant issue for Democrats, because the rollbacks that all these different journalists have been tracing, like Ari Berman, it's immense. States like Kansas, Wisconsin, they have really screwed up the principle of voting rights. And I think there's a massive opportunity for Democrats to have a broad issue here.
Right.
It's not a left-right issue. And again, it's rooted in constitutional principle about having a functioning democracy.
I couldn't agree with you more. So let's take a quick break. Come back with more of Julian Zelizer right here on the Dino Bidala Show. Look, it's time the media start calling out Trump's false statements for what they are. Lies. Trump is a liar. And by the looks of it, he's lying every day and twice on Sundays.
The Dino Bidala Show.
I'm Dean Obidala. I want to be your MBFF, and I'm really needy.
First, you got to follow him on Twitter at Dean Obidala or catch him on Facebook at facebook.com/Dean of Radio.
And welcome back. Dean Obidala Show, Monday, November 12th, here in studio with Julian Zelizer from CNN, contributor, professor at Princeton University. So, Julian, we talked about what's going on with the politics of recounts. What about the politics of lame ducks? And I want to play a clip. Matt, we're going to play a clip. Here's Congressman Mark Pocan on a couple of nights ago, Democrat from Wisconsin. He is co-chair of the Progressive Caucus, sharing his concerns about what Republicans might try to do in the lame duck session, which is actually beginning now, and they might be back 4 or 5 weeks. It's a short clip. Here's 7.
I worry about this. I worry about they're going to try to do funding for a wall because the appropriations bill we did for Homeland Security only funds through December. They're still in charge. I worry about Social Security and Medicare. You know, Paul Ryan has wanted 2 things in his adult life. 1, to get a tax cut for his wealthy friends, right, and 2, to privatize Social Security and voucherize Medicare. So we have to be ready for all of those things in a lame duck. So people have to be very, very vigilant.
What are the chances they try to turn Medicare into a voucher program in a lame duck? I mean, how, just historically, have there been significant policies enacted during a lame duck session of Congress?
Yeah, there were. In fact, after I think it was the end of the 2010, after those midterms, the Democrats actually pushed for a lot. They ratified the START treaty in the Senate. They got rid of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. I think they passed a big spending bill and a food safety bill. And there's a few other lame ducks. In the 50s, there was one that passed a big tax cut. In 1970, the Clean Air Act. So things do happen in lame ducks. I wouldn't discount it. And the principle of Republican politics these days is when you have the ability to do something, do it. You don't care about the controversy. You don't care about any principle. And I mean that. They're just kind of ruthless in that approach.
Sure.
So I would guess they're going to use their final weeks as a majority to try to do so. I don't know Social Security.
That's a
long haul.
I think he was just saying beware of anything. Yeah. But I mean, unless they're doing reconciliation in the Senate using that procedure, they're going to need 60 votes.
No, right.
Because McConnell's not going to get rid of. He can see maybe 2020 the Democrats might get control of the Senate. And he understands what could happen in 2020 and 2022, what would happen. So reconciliation was the procedure they can use once in a year to pass something, which is majority votes. But certainly they're going to confirm as many nominees to the federal court as possible.
They will be running in the door and right through, as fast as possible. And maybe something on immigration. Look, for a lot of the Republicans, that was an important issue, keeping the Senate. Even if it costs them the House, I could imagine there's some support. I don't know if to build a wall, but certainly to increase funding for border enforcement or something like that. I'd be watching for that. And some kind of something on taxes. Always keep your eye on that.
Unreal. I mean, who knows? They're going out the door and they're going to cause more problems before they go. What about... And I like that. It sounds crazy, but on my show, I've tried to encourage my fellow progressives to think way outside of the box. I may have told you this analogy. Like, I can't think like Trump, and most of us can't because we're not psychopaths. Like, you need to have like a political Hannibal Lecter to talk to and say, like, what would he do? And he'll be like, he's going to eat Nancy Pelosi's liver. I'm like, okay, I didn't think of that, but that's possible, right? So people have emailed me like, what if he does not allow them to seat the new Congress? Well, that violates the Constitution, but I'm glad progressives are thinking outside of the box, not to be paranoid, but you have to be ready for anything. I think he can't do that, but he'll delegitimize the House Democrats as much as possible. In fact, today he's blaming them for the stock market going down, saying your presidential harassment, literally tweeting about presidential harassment is knocking the stock market down. It's not. It was a tech slowdown, especially Apple stock, because the iPhone's not going to look like it's not going to sell as well. You also have gas prices, oil prices jumped up because of sanctions on Iran. You have these tariffs. You have a tax cut causing a higher deficit. But today was really a tech pullback in large part because of Apple. Do you think him trying to delegitimize the Democratic House, short of not seating, not somehow, you can't really not seat them. I looked at the Constitution because I'm like, there's a way he's doing it, but he can't.
Not going to do that. I mean, I know I shouldn't say that, but
dissolve the legislature like a king?
No, that's not our system. So there is a separation of power. He will do everything possible to connect the House results to any bad news that happens from now until January 2021. He will try to question the legitimacy of the House election results for sure. And he will try to entice them into losing their focus on issues they want. Part of me, when I heard about the Whitaker appointment and getting rid of Sessions, was like, he's setting them up to like be consumed with this,
right,
as opposed to healthcare or any other. I know that's speculation, but that was my instinct with him. And Nancy Pelosi, minority leader now, we'll see what she is. That's been one of her themes, that's going to be the challenge for Democrats. He will throw everything at them and try to totally confuse them, and the party can't fall for that. So I think all of that's ahead. They will be seated. You will have a Democratic House, but it is not going to be easy. And a lot of these Democrats, like you said, won in they're either Republican areas or they won by a small majority, so they're going to be skittish, and so that's a real challenge for the party.
I've written about politics long enough now. It's not been my whole career, but I worked in campaigns when I was younger and stuff. When these waves come, you're not safe because you voted against or for the president, or you try to run away from your own president. You tend to get sucked up. So Democrats are trying to save themselves by being slightly centrist or right. It doesn't. I don't see it working for them. They don't, because you're not getting the passion of your base. You're never going to get the other side, especially in the world we live in today, to come over, and you're going to lose the passion of your own base to come out for you. So forget it. And that's the world we live in because of ridiculous gerrymandering.
Yeah, look, you can. Some would argue you go to the left. Some would argue you go to the center. Whatever you do, the key is that you have 2 or 3 big issues that are good issues, that are issues that really matter to the party as a whole, and you move them. They're not going to pass them because they're not getting through the Senate. So we're talking about just putting issues on the table right now, and that's what the party needs to focus on more than an internal civil war. There were plenty of issues in this midterm that many Democrats agreed on. I mean, that's
healthcare, fundamentally.
Right there. Medicaid expansion, pre-existing conditions. In the healthcare bucket, there's tons of stuff left and center agree on. And the party shouldn't make a mistake of getting too invested in finding the wedges within their own party.
And Democrats did a good job of not engaging on the caravan,
right,
and staying on healthcare right to the end of the election. And Trump was doing everything he can. And where's the caravan, folks? It's not on Fox News anymore. Trump didn't tweet about it today. He stayed home, watched cable news, and tweeted all day. This was his snow day.
Yeah,
it was a threat of rain, so he didn't go to Arlington National Cemetery. So what about, we're already on the edge of 2020, and as of now, there's an article in Politico today about all the candidates who have, as they put it, parachuted into New Hampshire already to help candidates. And the list is just everybody. I mean, it's Bernie Sanders, Cory Booker, Gillibrand, Merkley, people we don't even talk about. The Jay Inslee, the governor from Washington State, John Hickenlooper from Colorado, the former governor, Terry McAuliffe, who was just on TV saying he might run, Tim Ryan, John Delaney from Maryland, Eric Swalwell already said he's going to run, Julian Castro, Mike Bloomberg, Michael Avenatti, Tom Steyer. Apparently, New Hampshire is the place to vacation, to hang out. So they went up there to help candidates. The list goes on. We could have 50 candidates. I mean, sincerely, what's the best case and worst case scenario for the Democrats going to this primary season to pick a presidential candidate?
The worst case might be a little like the Republicans last year, that you have this massive cast of candidates. No one really, the good ones, can't really make a case as you could in a narrower field. And in the end, someone who has more flair on TV or for some reason is more eccentric but appealing wins, but isn't really going to take on President Trump in a re-election. So the chaos of a lot of people leads the party to make a choice of someone who's not the winning candidate.
But they did it. They did it last time. The Republicans, they had a whole field.
Right.
They picked Trump, and the guy goes on to win.
Right. Okay.
That's
a fair argument.
You know, so you've got, but the fear, to me, my greatest fear is that there's so many candidates, it splinters so much of the stronger candidates, and someone who we really don't want becomes the nominee because it's just polarity, of vote. I mean, and I don't, after time you start losing candidates, it gets a smaller field. There's less likely that happens. But still, I can't predict who's going to be the nominee.
Yeah, but actually, Ray, I mean, the counterpoint is parties can survive lots of people in primaries. So Trump, whether you like him or dislike him, I'm sure there's not a listener here, right, who's a big fan. Maybe there are. But he won. Jimmy Carter faced a huge field in 1976. I think it was more than the Republicans had this year. He won the election. So it can happen. You have bitter primaries. Obama and Clinton was one of the most bitter that we have seen in a long time. He won. So the bitterness, the large numbers are not the prelude to a defeat. What really matters is picking the right person. Whether you have 2 people running or 30, it's about picking the right person. And that's going to be the question. I don't know who that is at this point.
Well, there were rumors over the weekend. There were rumors a few weeks ago, and I refused to even entertain them on the show, that Hillary Clinton might run. Then there was more reporting over the weekend from people actually who know Hillary. And it was different. This time it wasn't a game. It was that she's really seriously considering running. And I understand as a human being, you actually won this election and you lost the electoral vote and Russia got involved and this guy's horrific. And I would understand the interest of Hillary Clinton as a human being to run. If she runs, what do you think she does to the Democratic primary field?
That would be a bad development, I think. It's even different than the last 2 times in that, unlike some candidates who come back and finally remake themselves, Nixon is the model people talk about. He ran many times.
Unbelievable what he did. Right.
But with her, I think the defeat to Trump left an even worse taste in the mouth of many Democrats, meaning not a left versus right, not a she's corrupt or not. It's like she gave away the White House. She didn't have a campaign to beat him. And I think it'll be very hard for many Democrats to swallow, let's do this all again. And let's put her up for what is, in the minds of many Democrats, one of the most consequential presidential elections it will be in 2020. So I think, she will stir a lot of anger. And at the same time, she might squeeze out initially some other good, exciting people because everyone will be focused on her.
Right. Except for like a Joe Biden. If he were to run, he almost becomes the counter. Who knows what's going to, I have no clue. And folks, tonight we only have a few minutes left, so we can't take calls on this, but this is a topic we'll talk about later in the week, just out of interesting, because I want to hear from the progressive base, what if Hillary actually were to run? And if people would look at her with fresh eyes, because she's very impressive. She comes out there and she makes speeches. She knows issues inside and out. Right. She's extremely impressive.
She's
But at the same time, that there's still negatives as a candidate that she has that's still today. I mean, just turn negatives in polling. Yep. And I wonder if some Americans who didn't like her before, after Trump for a few years, go, wow, I should have voted for her, and I'm going to. Or
we won't risk that again.
So
go either way.
I don't know what's going to happen, but I know in a few months we're going to have debates and forums. We might have a forum in the next few weeks. Who knows? Let's take a quick break, come back. More of the Dean Obadala Show after this.
Dean Obadala Show on Sirius XM Progress 127. The future of progressive radio. This is the Dean Obadala Show on Sirius XM Progress 127.
And welcome back, Dean Obadala Show. We're live here. A couple minutes left with our friend Julian Zelizer from CNN. So, Julian, last minute left. What do you think? Well, 2020. I'm trying to think. What's the last thing here? 2020. What's the best case scenario for Democrats? I asked about the worst case. It's a bloodbath, and they destroy each other's message. And what's the best case?
The best case is this was a preview, and that you have a candidate who is a coalitional candidate who brings these different factions who have emerged, who don't have to be debilitating. It can be exciting, brings them together around a person like Obama did. And the election is exactly what some people thought it would be in 2016, a front lash against President Trump.
I can only wish. I'm just hoping we all keep our heads, our wits about us. We keep the goal in sight. And I think if there was ever a time that makes it slightly easier to keep the goal in sight, it's opposition to Donald Trump. So everyone knows whoever the nominee, but we don't know. We'll see what follows. Julian, thanks so much for coming in, my friend. Always check him out on CNN and on Twitter at Julian
Zelizer.
Julian Zelizer. Zelizer.
Follow
and I'll
me,
tweet out his article later at Dean Obadala. Hope you'll check it out. Be back tomorrow. All new live show. Thanks for tuning in, everyone.